I never thought this would be my story. You see, for the longest time, I believed in loyalty, real solid loyalty. I always thought that if you gave your heart to someone, that person would protect it, just like you'd protect theirs. I didn't think I'd ever have a reason to doubt Jessica. She was the one for me, or at least I thought she was. We've been married for 15 years. That's a long time, right? And during that time, I built my entire life around the idea that she was loyal, that we were solid. We had our ups and downs, sure, every couple does, but I trusted her. Trust was the foundation. It had to be. I never saw myself as the kind of guy who'd end up in a situation like this. I've seen it happen to others, men who end up getting betrayed, but I was sure Jessica wouldn't be one of those women. She was different, or so I thought. We had dreams, the kind that last until the end, growing old together, supporting each other. The idea of her cheating, that wasn't something I ever let cross my mind. I always told myself that bad women, the ones who cheat, they deserve punishment. But not Jessica. She was the exception, the loyal one. I guess I was naive to think that way, but back then, that's what I believed. So, I built my life around her. I put her first, focused on our future. I wanted to be next to someone loyal, someone who'd stick by me, no matter what. I thought that was us, and I clung to that belief. I guess every man has that fear deep down, the fear of being cheated on, but I always brushed it off. It wasn't something I thought I had to worry about, not with her. It's funny how the little things start adding up, but at the time, you don't even realize it. Looking back, there were signs, small things Jessica started doing that didn't feel right. It wasn't anything major at first, just subtle changes that I brushed off. She'd come home late more often, telling me it was work or catching up with friends. I didn't question it. Why would I? She had always been open with me. Then she started being a little more secretive with her phone. I'd ask her something, and she'd quickly lock the screen. At the time, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she just didn't want to be distracted. But every time it happened, I felt that pang in my gut. I didn't listen to it, though. I convinced myself it was just paranoia, my own insecurities playing tricks on me. There were other moments too. She seemed distracted when we were together. I'd ask her about her day, and she'd give me vague answers, almost like she wasn't really there with me. Again, I dismissed it. We've been married for years. People get busy, right? We all have those times when we're wrapped up in our own worlds. I didn't want to believe it was anything more than that. But that nagging feeling didn't go away. The more I tried to ignore it, the more it crept back in. Still, I didn't confront her. I didn't want to seem paranoid, and deep down, I didn't want to admit that something might be wrong. I trusted her. I had to trust her. After all these years, why wouldn't I? But as much as I tried to bury those thoughts, they kept coming back. I'd catch her laughing at a message on her phone and feel a knot in my stomach. I'd see her leaving the house, all dressed up, and wonder where she was really going. I hated that feeling. I hated doubting her. But no matter how much I told myself it was nothing, the doubt started growing. I guess that's when the conflict began. Part of me trusted her completely. This was Jessica, my wife. I had no reason not to believe her. But the other part of me, the part that noticed those small changes, was starting to question things. And the more I tried to push it away, the harder it got to ignore. I'll never forget the day everything came crashing down. It was a regular afternoon, nothing out of the ordinary. I was outside doing some yard work when my neighbor Tom came over. He's a friendly guy, always up for a chat, but this time there was something different in his face. He looked uneasy, like he had something weighing on him. "David, I need to talk to you about something," he said, shifting uncomfortably. I had no idea what he was about to say, but my gut twisted with the tension in his voice. I wiped the sweat from my brow and nodded. "Sure, what's going on?" He hesitated, and I could tell he didn't want to say it. "Look, I've been holding on to this for a long time, and I wasn't sure if I should tell you, but just back in the first year, you and Jessica were together, I saw her with someone else. Another guy. More than once." I just stood there, frozen. For a moment, I couldn't even process what he was saying. "What?" I asked, trying to make sense of it. "Are you sure? This is Jessica we're talking about." Tom nodded, his face apologetic. I didn't want to get involved, but it was pretty obvious. I didn't say anything back then because, well, I didn't think it was my place. But now, I feel like you should know. My mind started racing. The first year. That was when Jessica and I were just starting to build our life together. The time when we were still figuring each other out, when everything seemed new and exciting. Could she really have been with someone else back then? The thought hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to dismiss it right away. I wanted to believe there was some mistake, that Tom was wrong, or he saw something out of context. But the look on his face told me he wasn't making it up. He was telling me the truth, and it was the kind of truth I wasn't ready to hear. "Are you sure?" I asked again, my voice shaky. It was like I needed him to say something that would undo it all, but he didn't. He just nodded again, apologizing for not telling me sooner. I felt my legs go weak. I managed to nod and thank him for letting me know, but inside, everything was unraveling. Jessica, the woman I had trusted with my whole heart, the one I built my life around, could she really have done that? And during the first year, when we were just starting to become us, I couldn't wrap my head around it. I walked back inside, my mind a storm of disbelief and confusion. The room felt smaller, tighter. My stomach churned as I sat down, trying to breathe. Was it possible? Could the last 15 years of marriage have been built on a lie I never saw coming? After Tom left, I sat there in silence, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. Jessica, an affair. My mind wouldn't stop racing. I kept telling myself it couldn't be true. There had to be some mistake. Maybe Tom saw something out of context. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. But deep down, a part of me knew. I felt it in my gut, that sinking, sickening feeling that something had been off all along. I started replaying everything in my head, memories from that first year together. We were just getting to know each other, learning how to be a couple, finding our rhythm. I thought it was the best time of my life. I thought we were both all in, but now I couldn't help but question every single moment. Was she with him when she said she was working late? Did she smile at him the way she used to smile at me? Every memory was tainted now, every laugh we shared, every late-night conversation. How long had she been lying to me? And how could I not have seen it? I trusted her completely, and now I didn't even know if that trust had ever been real. I felt like a fool. 15 years of marriage, and I never had a clue, not even a hint. Was I that blind, or had I just chosen to ignore the signs because I didn't want to believe she was capable of something like this? The more I thought about it, the more my mind spiraled. I kept trying to rationalize it, to find some explanation that made sense. Maybe it didn't mean anything. Maybe it was just a mistake. But how could it be a mistake if it happened more than once? I couldn't wrap my head around it. The disbelief was overwhelming. 1 minute, I was convinced it was all a misunderstanding. The next, I was reliving every suspicious moment. Every time something didn't feel quite right. I didn't want to believe it, But the more I replayed those memories, the more it started to feel real. And that scared me. How could she do this to me? To us? We had built a life together. I thought we were solid, unbreakable. But now, all I could see were cracks. Cracks that had been there since the beginning, and I had been too blind to notice. I didn't want to accept it. I didn't want to believe that the woman I loved, the woman I built my life with, had betrayed me like this. But the truth was there, staring me in the face. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't push it away. As the reality of what happened started to sink in, I couldn't help but turn the blame on myself. I began questioning everything about who I was, about what I had or hadn't done. Was it me? Was I the reason she cheated? Had I failed her somehow? I started thinking about all the times I wasn't enough. I was never the guy with the flashy career or the big paycheck. I worked hard, but life never handed me success on a silver platter. I wondered if that was it, if my lack of money or status had pushed her away. Maybe she wanted more than what I could give her. Maybe I wasn't the man she needed. I thought back to the early days of our relationship. Sure, we had fun, but I wasn't exactly some knight in shining armor. I was just me. And suddenly, that didn't feel like it had ever been enough. I started doubting everything about myself, picking apart every failure, every time I didn't measure up. Was it my fault? Had I not made her feel loved enough? Was there something missing in me that she went looking for in someone else? Those questions kept gnawing at me, eating away at what little confidence I had left. The worst part was, I didn't have any answers. I didn't know if she cheated because of me or because of her. And that uncertainty was suffocating. Every time I looked in the mirror, all I could see were my own flaws, things I never noticed before, but suddenly seemed so obvious. The way I looked, the way I carried myself, the fact that I never made it as far in my career as I'd hoped. Was all of that just one big disappointment to her? I felt small, inadequate, like I had been pretending all along to be the kind of man she could love. And now, the truth was staring me in the face. Maybe I hadn't been enough. Maybe I never would be. It wasn't just about Jessica anymore. It was about everything I thought I was, and everything I felt like I'd failed to become. Her betrayal cut deep, but it also ripped open every insecurity I'd ever had. And suddenly, I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know if I was even worth fighting for. I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. The weight of what I'd learned from Tom was too heavy to keep inside. I had to confront Jessica. I needed to hear the truth from her, no matter how painful it would be. I needed answers. One night, after dinner, I finally sat her down. My heart was racing, my mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts. How was this going to go? Was she going to deny it? Would she admit everything? I couldn't predict what was about to happen, but I knew there was no turning back. "Jessica," I said, my voice trembling slightly, "we need to talk." She looked at me, sensing the seriousness in my tone. "What's going on, David? You're scaring me." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I talked to Tom," I began, and I could see the color drain from her face the moment his name came up. "He told me something about the first year we were together. He said he saw you with another man, more than once." For a second, there was nothing but silence. I watched as her eyes widened, her face tightening with a mix of shock and fear. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out at first. Then, after a moment, she finally said, "David, that's not true. Why would he say something like that? I don't know what he's talking about." But her voice wavered, and I could see the cracks in her denial. I wasn't buying it. Not this time. I need the truth, Jessica, I said, my voice firmer now. Don't lie to me, not after everything we've built together. Just tell me the truth. She stared at me for what felt like an eternity, her hands shaking slightly. Then finally, she dropped her gaze to the floor, and the words I had been dreading came tumbling out. It was a long time ago, she whispered. It was before we were serious. I made a mistake, but it didn't mean anything, David. It was just a stupid, meaningless thing. I felt my heart shatter in that moment. Even though I had suspected it, hearing her admit it made it real. The betrayal wasn't just a thought anymore. It was a fact, and I was standing face to face with it. I could barely speak, my throat tight with emotion. How could you? I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. How could you lie to me for all these years? Did I mean nothing to you back then? Tears started streaming down her face. David, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was young and stupid, and I didn't know what we were going to become. I never wanted to hurt you. Please, you have to believe me. I love you. I've always loved you. Her words hung in the air, but I wasn't sure I could hear them. My mind was too clouded with anger, pain, and confusion. She kept begging for forgiveness, but all I could feel was the weight of her betrayal, pressing down on me like a tidal wave. I don't know what to believe anymore, I said, my voice breaking. How can I ever trust you again after this? How can I believe anything you say? She reached for my hand, her eyes filled with desperation. Please, David. It was a mistake, a stupid mistake. I've been faithful to you ever since. Please don't throw away what we have, because of something that happened so long ago. But all I could think was, how could something like this not change everything? How could we just move on from this? I had no answers, only the overwhelming weight of her betrayal and the deep, aching wound it had left behind. After that night, everything felt different. I was living in the same house, sharing the same space with Jessica, but it all felt hollow, like there was this huge, invisible wall between us. I couldn't look at her without seeing the betrayal, without hearing her confession ringing in my ears. It was like the air between us had changed, thick with the weight of everything I now knew. The emotional turmoil was overwhelming. 1 minute, I'd feel numb, like I was floating through the days without really being there. The next, I'd be hit with a wave of anger or sadness so strong I'd have to catch my breath. I'd find myself standing in the kitchen or sitting on the couch, just staring at nothing, my mind replaying her words over and over again. It didn't mean anything. It was just a mistake. But how could it not mean something? How could it not change everything? I wanted to forgive her. I wanted to move past it, to pretend like it didn't matter. But it did. It mattered more than I wanted to admit. Every time I looked at her, I couldn't help but think of all the moments I'd trusted her completely, all the times I thought we were building something solid. And now it felt like all of that had been built on a lie I hadn't seen coming. The hardest part was the uncertainty. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. Could I really let go of something like this? Could I trust her again, knowing what I knew now? And even if I could forgive her, would things ever be the same? I wasn't sure, and that scared me. I had always thought of myself as someone who could handle anything, but this was different. It cut deeper than anything I'd ever experienced before. Some nights, I'd lie in bed next to her, and I couldn't even close my eyes. I'd just stare at the ceiling, my mind spinning with thoughts. I'd wonder if she was really sorry, or if she was just sorry she got caught. I'd wonder if I'd ever be able to look at her the same way again, or if this was the beginning of the end for us. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to move forward. Every part of me was aching, broken by the realization that the person I trusted most in the world had betrayed me in the most personal way. I felt lost, like I was stuck in this place between wanting to forgive her and knowing that maybe I never could. Days turned into weeks, and I still couldn't make up my mind. The decision to stay or leave was hanging over me like a storm cloud, and I felt trapped beneath it. On one hand, how could I walk away from 15 years of marriage? 15 years of shared memories, shared struggles, and a life we built together. We had weathered other storms, but nothing like this. Could I really just leave all of that behind? But on the other hand, how could I stay with someone who had broken my trust so completely? Every time I thought about it, my stomach turned. The idea of staying and trying to rebuild what we had seemed impossible. I wasn't sure if I could ever look at her the same way again, let alone trust her. I weighed the options constantly, going back and forth in my head. Some days, I'd think about leaving, starting fresh, walking away from the pain and betrayal. Maybe I could find peace in that. Maybe it would be easier to let go of everything and try to rebuild my life on my own. But then I'd think about all the years we'd spent together, the life we had built. Was I really ready to throw that away? Then there were the moments when I'd see glimpses of the woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago. The way she'd try to make things better. How she'd look at me with such guilt and sorrow in her eyes. Part of me wanted to believe her, that she was truly sorry and that she still loved me. I wanted to believe that we could find a way through this, that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild what we had lost. But I wasn't sure if that was even possible. Every day felt like a tug of war between my heart and my mind. My heart still loved her. I didn't want to admit it, but it did. Even after everything, that love was still there, buried beneath all the hurt and anger. But my mind kept telling me that I deserved better, that I couldn't stay in a relationship built on a lie. I kept asking myself, if I stayed, would I always be haunted by what she did? Would the betrayal ever fade, or would it hang over us forever? I couldn't make a decision. I didn't know if I was strong enough to stay and try to rebuild, or if I had the courage to walk away and start over. The uncertainty was crushing, and no matter which way I leaned, the doubt remained. So, I stayed in limbo, unsure of what the future held. The loop of whether to stay or leave was wide open, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever be able to close it. I couldn't keep it all inside anymore. The weight of everything was too much to carry on my own, so I reached out to a few close friends and family. I needed advice. I needed someone to tell me what to do, to help me make sense of it all. But even that turned out to be more complicated than I expected. First, I called my brother, Mark. We've always been close, and he's the kind of guy who gives it to you straight, no sugarcoating. I laid everything out for him, what happened, how I found out, and how I didn't know whether I should stay or leave. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "David, I don't know how you could ever trust her again. I mean, she lied to you for years. Do you really think you can move past that? Personally, I'd walk away. You deserve better." Hearing him say it out loud hit me hard. I knew part of me felt the same way, but it was painful to think about actually leaving. Mark was right about one thing. I didn't know how I'd ever trust her again. But could I really just leave? Was that what I deserved, or was there more to it? Then I talked to my mum. I figured she'd have a different perspective, and of course, she did. She's always been the kind to see the best in people, to believe in second chances. When I told her about Jessica, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "David, I know she hurt you, and I know this is probably the hardest thing you've ever had to go through. But if she's truly sorry, and if you still love her, maybe it's worth trying to work it out. People make mistakes, but that doesn't mean they don't deserve a chance to make things right. Her words softened me a little, but they didn't make the decision any easier. I still loved Jessica, even after everything, but was love enough to get past the betrayal? Could I really forgive her and rebuild the trust that had been shattered? Then, there was my best friend, Mike. We've been through a lot together, and I trusted him to give me an honest opinion. When I told him, he didn't hesitate. Look, man, I get it. You've been together a long time, and it's hard to walk away from that. But you've got to think about yourself here. You deserve to be with someone who values you enough not to cheat. You deserve to be happy. If staying with her means you're going to be miserable or constantly questioning her loyalty, then maybe it's time to let go. Each person I talked to gave me a different perspective, and each one made sense in its own way. Mark's hard truth, my mum's belief in forgiveness, and Mike's focus on my happiness. But the more I talked, the more conflicted I became. No one could make the decision for me, and no one could really understand the depth of what I was going through. Talking to friends and family helped me feel less alone, but it didn't give me the clarity I was hoping for. If anything, it made me realize that there was no clear answer, no easy way forward. Everyone had their own opinion, but at the end of the day, I was the one who had to live with the decision, and no matter what advice I got, I still didn't know what to do. In the end, I decided to stay. I wasn't sure if it was the right choice, but I wasn't ready to walk away just yet. There was still a part of me that wanted to believe we could rebuild, that maybe somehow we could find our way back to the way things were. But as much as I wanted that, the doubt never really left me. It lingered, always there, just beneath the surface. I tried, I really did. I told myself that if I was going to stay, I needed to try to trust her again, to let go of the past and move forward. But it was harder than I imagined. Every time she left the house, I'd find myself wondering where she was really going. Was she meeting up with someone else? Was she still lying to me? It didn't matter how many times she reassured me that it was all in the past, that she loved me and only me. The doubt was always there, gnawing away at me. I became hyper-aware of everything she did. If her phone buzzed and she didn't check it in front of me, I'd feel that familiar knot in my stomach. If she was late coming home, I'd start imagining the worst. Every little thing felt like a potential sign that she was hiding something. And no matter how hard I tried to push those thoughts away, they kept coming back. It was exhausting, living with that constant suspicion. I wanted to trust her. I really did. But every time I started to let my guard down, something would trigger that doubt again. It was like a switch that I couldn't turn off. Even when things felt normal between us, there was always this underlying tension, this nagging feeling that I was missing something, that I couldn't completely trust her. I hated feeling that way. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband, constantly checking up on her, questioning her every move. But after what happened, how could I not? How could I just go back to the way things were? Pretending like the betrayal never happened? It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about me too. I realized that I had been changed by what she did, and no matter how much I wanted to believe we could rebuild, part of me wasn't sure if I'd ever truly trust her again. The uncertainty was like a shadow, following me everywhere, and I didn't know if it would ever go away. So, we stayed together, but the doubt lingered. It haunted me, creeping into every conversation, every moment we shared. I wanted to believe we could fix things, but deep down, I wasn't sure if that was possible. And the longer the doubt stayed, the more I began to wonder if staying was really the right choice after all. I knew I couldn't keep living in this state of constant doubt and suspicion. It was draining me, and it was starting to affect every part of my life. I couldn't focus at work, I wasn't sleeping well, and I felt like I was losing myself in all the chaos. I realized that if I was going to move forward, whether I stayed with Jessica or not, I needed to focus on healing myself first. That's when I decided to seek help. Therapy wasn't something I had considered before, but I knew I needed an outlet, a way to process everything that had happened and figure out how to regain control of my life. Sitting down with a therapist for the first time felt strange, but as I started talking, I could feel the weight of everything I had been carrying start to lift. We talked about the betrayal, of course, but we also talked about me, my insecurities, my fears, the way I had been questioning my worth ever since I found out about the affair. For the first time, I realized that if I was going to heal, I needed to rebuild myself from the ground up. This wasn't just about Jessica anymore, it was about me taking back control of my own life and my own sense of self-worth. So, I started focusing on me. I spent more time doing things that made me feel good. Exercise, reconnecting with old hobbies I had let slip away, and even just taking time to clear my mind. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of days when the doubt and pain crept back in. But little by little, I started to feel stronger. I began to understand that healing wasn't something that happened overnight. It was a process, a long one. But every small step I took toward regaining control of my life made a difference. I started to see that my worth wasn't defined by Jessica's betrayal or by any of the insecurities that had plagued me before. It was something I had to build for myself, independent of anyone else. As I started to heal, I realized that no matter what happened with Jessica, I was going to be okay. Whether we stayed together or not, I had the strength to rebuild my life. I didn't need her to fix me. I was learning to trust myself again, and that was the most important thing. The more I worked on myself, the more I began to feel a sense of peace, a glimmer of hope. The pain of the betrayal was still there, but it wasn't controlling me anymore. I was starting to heal, starting to find my footing again. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could see a future for myself, one that wasn't defined by the past, but by the strength I was building within myself. As time went on, I started to feel more like myself again. I had been working on healing, focusing on rebuilding my confidence, and finding strength within myself. Things with Jessica, well, we were still together, but there was a distance between us that I wasn't sure would ever go away. I didn't know if we could truly rebuild what we had lost, but I kept moving forward. That's when I met Michael. It wasn't planned. I wasn't looking for anything, not after everything I had been through. But life has a way of throwing things at you when you least expect it. We met through a mutual friend at a gathering, and I immediately felt something different. He was kind, easy to talk to, and there was this connection that I hadn't felt in a long time. At first, I was hesitant. I wasn't ready to dive into anything new. The idea of opening up to someone else, of trusting someone after everything I'd been through, felt like a risk I wasn't sure I was ready to take. My walls were still up, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to let them down. But Michael didn't push. He wasn't in a rush, and that made it easier. We started spending time together, nothing serious, just grabbing coffee or going for walks. It was simple, no pressure, and slowly I found myself opening up to him. I told him about my past, about Jessica, about the doubts and insecurities I had been struggling with. And the thing was, He listened, really listened. He didn't try to fix me or offer solutions. He was just there, letting me process everything in my own time. Still, there was always that hesitation. Part of me was still scared, afraid of getting hurt again. The thought of trusting someone, of letting someone new into my life, was terrifying. What if it all happened again? What if I let myself believe in someone, only to be betrayed again? Those fears were hard to shake, and I wasn't sure if I ever truly could. But the more time I spent with Michael, the more I realized that maybe, just maybe, it was worth the risk. He was patient with me, never pushing me to move faster than I was ready for. And that made a difference. Slowly, I began to feel like I could let my guard down, even if just a little. I wasn't sure where things would go with him. I wasn't sure if I was ready for another relationship, or if I ever would be. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe it was okay to try again, to take things slow, to trust in the possibility of something new. I wasn't diving in head first, but I was starting to let myself believe that maybe, after everything, I could find happiness again. As time passed, things with Michael started to change. At first, I wasn't sure where it would go, but the more time we spent together, the closer we became. It wasn't like I woke up one day and decided I was ready to fall in love again. It happened gradually, bit by bit. The walls I had built around myself, the ones I thought were permanent, started to come down, little by little. Michael was different. He understood my hesitations, my fears, and never once pushed me to move faster than I was ready for. We spent more time together, and I began to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. Safe to be myself. Safe to be vulnerable. And most of all, safe to trust again. It wasn't easy. There were still moments when the doubts would creep back in, when I'd wonder if I was setting myself up to be hurt again. But with Michael, those fears didn't control me the way they once had. As our relationship deepened, I started to realize that love and trust were possible again. It didn't have to be this all-or-nothing battle with my past. It could be something new, something different. With Michael, I didn't have to carry the weight of what had happened before. He wasn't trying to fix me, and I wasn't looking to be fixed. We were just us. For the first time since Jessica's betrayal, I felt like I could truly breathe again. I could see a future that wasn't defined by the pain of the past, but by the strength I had found within myself, and by the love I had found with Michael. I wasn't rushing toward anything. In fact, it was the opposite. We were taking things slowly, but it was steady, real, and honest. I often found myself reflecting on everything that had happened, how Jessica's betrayal had torn me apart, how it had left me questioning everything about myself. And yet without all that pain, without that journey through doubt and healing, I wouldn't have ended up where I am now. I wouldn't have met Michael, and I wouldn't have realized just how strong I had become. In a way, the betrayal had led me here. It had forced me to confront the parts of myself I had been avoiding for so long. It had made me rebuild myself, not just for someone else, but for me. And now, standing on the other side of all that heartache, I could finally see the bigger picture. I had found love again, not because I was trying to replace what I lost, but because I had learned to open myself up to the possibility of something new. And in doing so, I had found something better, something real and grounded in trust and mutual respect. It wasn't about forgetting the past, but about moving forward with the lessons it taught me. I never thought I'd say this, but in some strange way, I'm grateful for the journey. Without it, I wouldn't be where I am now. And where I am now, I'm happy, truly happy. As I look back on everything that's happened, I realize just how far I've come. It wasn't easy. It never is when your world gets turned upside down. But through all the pain, doubt, and heartbreak, I found something I never expected to find: myself. There were moments when I thought I'd never get through it. Moments when the weight of the betrayal felt too heavy to carry. But I did get through it. Not by ignoring the pain, but by facing it head-on, piece by piece. I learned that healing isn't about pretending things never happened. It's about letting them shape you into someone stronger, someone wiser. The hardest part of this journey was learning to trust again, not just in others, but in myself. For so long, I let the betrayal define who I was, but now I understand that I'm more than what happened to me. I'm more than the man who was cheated on. I'm the man who rebuilt his life, who found love again, and who learned to value his own worth. And that's where the closure comes in. I'm not holding on to the anger or the pain anymore. I'm not letting the past dictate my future. I've made peace with what happened, with the choices I made, and with the person I've become. Jessica's betrayal hurt me deeply, but it also pushed me to grow in ways I never thought possible. And now I can look at that experience and see it for what it was: a part of my journey, but not the end of my story. I've found love again, yes, but more importantly, I've found peace within myself. The loops that were once open, whether I would stay or leave, whether I could trust again, whether I could find happiness, they've all been closed. I've found my answers, and they've led me to a place of strength and clarity. So, here I am, standing on the other side of it all, stronger than I ever thought I could be. And for that, I'm grateful.